Möðruvallabók is the largest manuscript extant that contains sagas of Icelanders. It's a massive volume. It was written around the middle of the 14th century, and it now contains 188 leaves of parchment. But there are some lacunae in it. For instance, the beginning of Saga was lost. It was then replaced in the 17th century by leaves with the text. So it has lived through this and that, you could say. But it's a handsome volume, and you could see that it was a prestigious one. The text is laid out in 2 columns, which was always kind of more grand. And there are also colored initials and other things that show that this was made by or for somebody who was a well-to-do person. Möðruvallabók contains 11 sagas, and the first 7 sagas are organized in what we might call a geographical pattern. The book begins with Njáls Saga, and then we travel clockwise around Iceland almost. After Njáls Saga we have Egils Saga. Njáls Saga, of course, is set mostly in the south of Iceland, and then we have Egils Saga, which is set in Borgarfjörður mostly, and so on. And the last of these 7 sagas is Droplaugarssonar Saga, which takes place in the east of Iceland. So you might think that this was planned like this always, or from the beginning, but that need not be so. The scribe, or even his patron, may have intended to have other texts in this book as well. There is an indication, because after the text of Njáls Saga is finished, the scribe seems to have written at the bottom of the page, "Láttu hér rita Gauks sögu Trandilssonar." You should have somebody write Gauks Saga Trandilssonar here, and then he refers to a certain person called Grímur, who he believes owns a copy of this saga. But Gauks Saga is not extant. It may never have been in this manuscript, and it's not contained in any other manuscript. Many manuscripts, of course, were lost during the Middle Ages and later, and we only possess a fraction of them. Hence, there are undoubtedly texts that once were written down, but we don't have today, and even have no knowledge of today. So we're lucky in that we at least have this mention of Gauks Saga, so we can presume that such a saga existed. Gaukur Trandilsson is a character that also is mentioned in Njáls Saga, and it's therefore kind of logical that Gauks Saga would then have been meant to follow on from Njáls Saga in a manuscript. Gaukur, interestingly, is also mentioned in a runic inscription in Meishá in Orkney, where the carver says that he has carved the inscription with the axe that was owned by Gaukur Trandilsson. So Gaukur Trandilsson was a historical person. Back to the organization of the manuscript. So at some point, somebody may have intended it to contain Gauks Saga, but we can also see from codicological evidence that the manuscript as it is now was not always one book. There are indications that Njáls Saga was written separately and may have been intended for a kind of a single volume, to be in a single volume, possibly with Gauks Saga. Egils Saga may also have been a self-contained codicological unit. And then the rest of the sagas, they are more closely connected, codicologically speaking. And then at some point, somebody had the idea to bring all this together. And we have no way of knowing when exactly this happened, but it was before the 17th century.